For country music legend George Strait, music wasn't always everything at one point. He was prepared to walk away from his career altogether to focus on the one person who's been his anchor through it all, his wife, Norma Strait. Norma has been the quiet force behind George's success. Calm, steady, and deeply supportive, she has stood by him from the very beginning. She even appeared in the music video for his song Codigo, a subtle nod to the role she's played in his life, behind the scenes. But now, it's George's turn to be there for Norma, as they continue to carry the weight of a shared personal loss that still echoes in their lives. Their love story began long before the fame. Back in high school, George and Norma went to the same school, passing each other in the hallways, but not speaking at least. Not at first. George may have been hesitant because of his demanding life at the time. His father, John Byron, Strait Sr., is a junior high school math teacher who also managed a 200-acre cattle ranch near Big Wells, Texas. Weekends and summers meant long, hot days working the ranch, leaving little time for teenage romance. Still, something about Norma caught George's eye. He finally asked her out on a date and immediately thought she was hot, his own words. But after that first date, they didn't see each other for a while. Life got in the way. Or maybe, deep down, George was still affected by the emotional scars of his childhood. When George was just in 4th grade, his parents divorced. His sister Pensy went to live with their mother, while George and his brother Buddy stayed with their father. That family split had a lasting impact. Even though George had the structure of ranch life, something always felt like it was missing. But he couldn't get Norma off his mind. Eventually he reached out again, and this time their connection stuck. They began dating seriously while attending Pazel High School together. Of course, high school wasn't just about romance for George. As much as he loved working the ranch and living the cowboy lifestyle, another passion was quietly taking root music. Surprisingly, George's first musical love wasn't country, it was rock and roll. Like many young Americans during the British invasion era, he was swept up by bands like the Beatles. He joined a local group called the Stoics, pulling inspiration from British rock legends and performing at local venues. Back then, George was so far removed from country music that he didn't even listen to it on the radio. He preferred the farm reports. He followed rock wherever it led, joining multiple bands and performing throughout his youth. But that all changed the moment he saw a live country music performance. Something clicked. One show led to another, and soon George found himself drawn into the world of country music. The connection was instant and real. It spoke to his roots, his upbringing, and something deeper inside him. From that point on, everything shifted. The boy who once chased rock and roll was now stepping into the boots of a country icon. And by his side, through it, all through the struggles, the triumphs, the personal heartbreak, was Norma. Their love story is more than just romance. It's a tale of resilience, partnership, and quiet strength. Da-da-da-da-da-da. And for George Strait, no amount of fame could ever compare to the woman who's been with him from the start. George Strait may be the king of country, but even kings have humble beginnings and heartbreak. Before fame, before the sold-out shows and chart-topping hits, George was just a young man in love with two things: music and Norma. After falling in love with country music legends like Frank Sinatra, Hank Thompson, Lefty Frizzle, Merle Haggard, George Jones, Bob Wills, and Hank Williams, George knew where his heart belonged musically, but he was still figuring out where life would take him, who would be by his side. His relationship with Norma had been on and off during high school, but George finally decided to make a bold move, one that was either wildly romantic or just plain crazy. Maybe both. He and Norma eloped to Mexico after graduation and got married on December 4th, 1971. It was them against the world, and George loved those odds. After their secret wedding, they returned to Purcell, Texas, for a traditional church ceremony. Their love story seemed like something out of a romance novel, but the heartbreak that would eventually come was something even the most tragic novelists would hesitate to write. For now, though life was peaceful and full of promise, George's love wasn't just reserved for Norma or country music. He had a deep love for his country too. When the time came to serve, he didn't hesitate. He enlisted in the U.S. Army in 1971 and was stationed at Schofield Barracks in Hawaii. Not long after, Norma joined him. The two began a new chapter together. On October 6, 1972, they welcomed their daughter Jennifer into the world. George was a husband, a father, soldier, and still chasing the dream of becoming a musician. While serving, George auditioned for a U.S. Army-sponsored country band called Rambling Country and got in. They performed both on and off base. For the first time, George felt like all the pieces of his life were coming together. In 1975, George left the Army with the rank of corporal and returned to Texas. He enrolled at Texas State University to study agriculture. A natural choice given his upbringing on a ranch, but he never gave up on music. One day, George saw a flyer on campus. A band called Stony Ridge was looking for a lead singer. He auditioned, got the gig, and eventually helped rebrand the group as Ace and the Whole Band. They began touring honky-tonks and bars across Texas. It's even opening for major acts like Asleep at the Wheel and the Texas Playboys. Their regional popularity grew. They caught the attention of D Records in Houston. George wrote and recorded singles for the label, but none of them made an impact. Frustrated and financially strained, George kept working on his father's ranch by day and performing by night. Still, Norma believed in him. Even when George began to lose hope, Norma remained his biggest cheerleader. A turning point came when they met Irv Woosley, a bar manager and former employee of MCA Records. Woosley became a friend and advocate, talking up George and his band to industry insiders. People liked George's sound, but they weren't convinced he'd appeal to a mainstream audience. The rejections piled up. George traveled to Nashville knocking on doors, but every label turned him down. The weight of failure was crushing. He needed to support his family, and music wasn't doing that. Eventually, George accepted an offer to design cattle pens for a ranch. It was steady work, but it wasn't his dream. He told his band he was quitting music, but Norma wasn't having it. She sat George down and begged him to try one more year. Just one more year to chase the dream. George, who loved her deeply, agreed. That decision changed everything. In 1981, George got one final chance. MCA Records offered him a single record deal. The condition: if the first song did well, they'd consider a full album. If not, it was over. That first single was unwound. Backed by his loyal Ace and the Whole Band, George released the song, and it soared to No. 6 on the Billboard Hot Country Songs chart. That one song was enough to greenlight an album. Enough to prove George Strait wasn't just another cowboy with a guitar. He was the real deal, and it all happened because Norma wouldn't let him give up. George Strait's rise to country music royalty came fast, but so did the heartbreak that would nearly break him and his wife, Norma. After releasing his debut album Straight Country, George immediately became the hottest name in the genre. His music was a breath of fresh air, returned to the traditional sounds of country at a time when pop influences were flooding the airwaves. Critics and fans alike praised his authenticity, and his clean-cut cowboy image only amplified his appeal. George wasn't chasing trends, he was honoring country's roots, and the world loved him for it. But 1981 brought more than just fame. It brought family. That same year, Norma gave birth to their second child, son named George Bubba Strait Jr. By 1982, George scored his first ever No. 1 hit with Foolhardy Memory, solidifying his place as a star with staying power. He was living the dream, combining all of his passions, music, family, and the rodeo. When legendary performer Eddie Rabette fell ill and couldn't headline the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo in 1983, George stepped in and never looked back. From 1983 to 1984, he released 5 consecutive projects that hit No. 1 on the Billboard charts. In the same period, he was awarded Top Male Vocalist at the Country Music Awards. But none of it would have been possible without Norma. While George's career took off, she made a sacrifice few ever saw. She gave up her own ambitions to raise their children and hold their family together. She stayed grounded so George could soar. Then came the tragedy that no award, no chart-topping single, and no sold-out concert could ever heal. By 1986, their daughter Jennifer, affectionately called Jen, was 13 years old. She had lots of friends, and her parents, always protective but trusting, kept close tabs on the people she spent time with. When Jennifer asked to go out one evening, George and Norma agreed. She was growing up, and they wanted to give her the independence she deserved. They had no idea it would be the last time they'd see her alive. Jennifer was riding in the front seat of a car driven by a family friend, Gregory Wilson Allen. She wasn't wearing her seatbelt. As the car sped through a curve, Allen lost control. The vehicle flipped. Jennifer was partially ejected and crushed when the car landed on its side. She died instantly. She was only 13. The driver was charged with a Class A misdemeanor for vehicular homicide. But the damage was done. Jennifer wouldn't be coming back. The loss of their daughter shattered George and Norma to the core. George, the pillar of strength on stage, was broken. Norma's grief was especially heavy. As a mother, she felt she'd failed to protect her daughter, a burden no parent should bear. From that moment on, George withdrew from public interviews. He refused to talk about the tragedy, choosing instead to grieve in private. Behind the spotlight, he was a grieving father, trying to hold his family together. But Norma needed a way to transform her pain into purpose. In 1986, she and George launched the Jennifer Lynn Strait Foundation, a charity dedicated to supporting children in need. Through it, Norma hoped to give other children the opportunities Jennifer never got to have. Perhaps prevent other families from suffering a similar loss. Norma took her role as co-founder seriously. She poured herself into the foundation's work while continuing to raise their young son, Bubba, who was just 5 at the time. Through unthinkable grief, she stayed strong, not just for George, for the family they still had. George kept performing, honoring his commitments, and building a legacy, but the memory of Jennifer never left them. She remained a silent part of every song, every award, every moment. And behind the cowboy hat, the fame, and the music, there is always Norma, strong, steadfast, and the heart that held George Strait's world together. George Strait never took a break, not even when life gave him every reason to. After the devastating loss of his daughter, and Jennifer in 1986, George didn't step away from music. Couldn't. The only way he knew how to cope with the grief was to sing, as the pain of losing his child echoed endlessly in his mind. George poured every ounce of sorrow, love, and longing into his music. What followed was nothing short of extraordinary, a run of 11 consecutive one hits from 1986 to 1989. Each song felt more personal than the last, and audiences connected deeply with the raw emotion behind his voice. That legendary streak eventually helped George surpass Conway Twitty's record for the most one hits on Billboard's Hot Country Songs chart. But he didn't stop there. George Strait went on to set the all-time record for the most one songs across all charts in any genre of music. As his dominance grew, so did the accolades. George became the most nominated artist in the history of both the Country Music Association (CMA) and the Academy of Country Music (ACM) awards. In 1989 and 1990, he was crowned CMA Entertainer of the Year. And in 1990, he also took home the ACM's top honor. Years later, in 2013, and again in 2014, George returned to win both awards once more, solidifying his status as one of the most decorated and respected country artists of all time. But it wasn't just awards that defined his greatness, it was innovation. George revolutionized the country concert scene, pioneering festival-style tours that combine massive crowds, live storytelling, and a celebration of the cowboy lifestyle. These tours didn't just make money, they became cultural landmarks. In June 2014, during the Cowboy Rides Away tour, George performed at a TNT Stadium in Arlington, Texas, drawing 104,792 fans, the largest indoor concert in North American history at the time. But even that record would eventually be broken by George himself. In 2024, George Strait performed at Kyle Field in College Station, Texas, and made history once again. With a jaw-dropping attendance of over 110,000 people, he set the record for the largest ticketed concert by a single artist in U.S. history. Yet, for longtime fans, some of George's most legendary performances will always be his appearances at the Houston Livestock Show and Rodeo. Over the years, he's played more than 20 times, entertaining more than 1 million fans, and becoming an integral part of the event's history beyond the stage. George Strait's achievements in music sales are staggering. He has sold more than 120 million records worldwide, including over 70 million in the U.S. alone, making him the 12th best-selling artist in American music history. His discography includes 33 platinum or gold-certified albums, a feat few artists in any genre can match. In recognition of his impact, George Strait is set to be inducted into the 2025 Hollywood Walk of Fame class, and fans everywhere are asking, what took so long? Still, behind all the success, the fame, the accolades, the broken records, remains a quiet ache that never truly fades. George and Norma Strait still carry the weight of Jennifer's memory with them. They don't often speak about their loss publicly, but in the rare moments they do, they choose gratitude over grief, rather than lament what they lost. George and Norma have spoken about the gift of the 13 years they had with Jennifer. That kind of strength, the ability to find light in life's darkest corners, says more about them than any record or award ever could. They are not just survivors, they are the heart of a story that turned pain into purpose and music into a legacy.